everyone. Welcome to today's live digital roadshow featuring Ion Energy's CEO, Haji, who's going to be going through a company presentation, and afterwards going to be going into a live Q&A session. So if you'd like to participate, please feel free to submit any questions that you have in the chat found on the right-hand side of your screen. And later on in today's session, we're also going to be posting a survey in the chat. If you want to get in touch with Ion Energy, please feel free to fill that out. And as always, this event is being recorded. It's going to be available on demand in the coming days. So if you need a refresh, take a look for that. Without further ado, Ali, if you might not want, or if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, and we can get your presentation up, and we can get started.
Thank you, Cam, and thank you for attendees.
Wonderful.
Ion Energy is a company that I co-founded in 2017 with the goal of finding lithium in Mongolia. Mongolia, of course, being very close to China, a big consumer of lithium today, and a country in which we have a fair bit of experience. We've since complemented our value proposition with acquisitions in the Northwest Territories here in Canada as well. I will be making forward-looking statements, so please be aware of those. As a corporation today, we have over 120,000 hectares under our control. We are first movers in the brine space, of course, in Mongolia. We started exploration back in 2020 when we went public. And as a result of the Canadian acquisition, we are a global company. A bit of background, but I'll let you read that for yourselves, or you can visit this on our website. A bit about the team. I've had about 13 years, or maybe 14 now, I suppose, of asset management experience at Invesco, a global asset manager, including M&A. I went into the mining space about 6 years ago. My father's been in mining for the last 4 decades, so I have a bit of a sense of it, but didn't really quite think that I would have fallen into it, but here we are. Matthew Wood, our chairman, a serial mining entrepreneur, Rio Tinto Gold scholar, an individual that's had exits in Armenia, Brazil, and other countries. His more recent exit was the sale of Avanco Resources in Brazil to Oz Minerals for about 440 million Aussie in March 2018. Wendy Lee represents our Asian relationships. She's an ex-Noble employee. She has done commodities trades for copper, gold, and coal between Mongolia and China as well. Bata and Enki at the far end of the slide there are 2 Mongolian directors. Important to have local jurisdictional directors. Bata is the chief executive of Step Gold, a gold producer in Mongolia, but also an advisor to the Ministry of Mines. He was with the prior government and exists as an advisor to the incumbent. So essentially politically agnostic with respect to Mongolia today. Anil is a mining banker, ex-Dundee Goodman, so very happy to have him, a fantastic capital markets resource. And Enki provides us with the necessary equipment and personnel in country for us to succeed. John McVicker, ex-EY, so happy to have him as CFO, but the next 5 individuals are really where the lithium experience should shine to our listeners. Paul Fornazzari was the original chairman of Lithium Americas, the original founding director of Neo Lithium, and a senior partner at Fasken. He was the lawyer on file that sold Neo Lithium to Zijin for about $1 billion 14, 15 months ago. Neo Lithium, as you may know, in Argentina, a very promising project that is, of course, of world class at about 980 milligrams per liter. He's also a board member at Champion Electric, as well as an advisor to various other lithium companies. He brought on Don Haynes, an individual that wrote the very first 43-101 for a lithium company on the TSX, a gentleman that's been to site about 4 times now for Ion Energy, an advisor to LRC, which is Lithium Royalty Corp, backed by the Warta Group, about $1 billion market cap that went public about 6 weeks ago as well. Dr. Hashbat Dashtatsaren is our in-country hydrogeologist. He is focused on looking for lithium assets in country, but works alongside Don Haynes and Dr. Mark King to execute our exploration programs. Dr. Mark King was the QP on file when Neo Lithium sold to Zijin for about $1 billion, as I just mentioned, but he's worked with Albemarle and Lithium Americas as well. And then Dr. David Deek, very much logistics. So did some work with Lithium Americas and then was a key factor of bringing in Gigafactory 1 in Nevada when they brought Tesla online there. So a bit about Mongolia. I feel like this is a jurisdiction that's perhaps lesser understood by the vast majority of investors. The vast majority of us, or historically, thought that it was part of China. But it is, in fact, a sovereign nation that gained independence in 1991. They have true and fair elections every 4 years. It's a country that has 3.5 million people, about 1.5 million square kilometers, very much dictated or driven by the mining environment. 80% of the GDP comes from mining. Rio Tinto, which is owned by Oyu Tolgoi, which is run by Rio Tinto, is the third largest copper gold mine in the world that operates in Mongolia today. They put about an $8 billion investment into the country. You have enough skilled labor there to ensure that you are successful, but also you're able to operate with margin. Hunnu Coal is a company that my chairman started in 2009 with the sole focus of looking for coal in Mongolia, found 2 assets. He ultimately took them public on the ASX in a $20 million IPO. Exited about 18 months later to Banpu of Thailand, that is a major sort of energy consumer out of Thailand, for $500 million. A big exit, a massive sort of foundational piece of success for us as an organization to succeed in country. And in 2016, we went back to Mongolia looking at ATO, which is an asset that was owned by Centerra, a global gold mining company today. Acquired that through a streaming agreement with Triple Flag Mining Finance, as well as some backing from the Elliott Group out of New York, so Paul Singer. In 2018, it was the only mining IPO on the main board of the TSX when everybody was so keen on cannabis and what have you. But since then, Step Gold is now a producer of gold, producing 50,000 ounces at a cash cost of $850 all-in sustaining. With ION, the focus has been to mirror the sort of accumulation and agglomeration of assets that Hunnu Coal did, but Step Gold being a producer that essentially came from greenfield, permitted, but now producing. And the statistic there is, only about 3% of companies come to actual production in terms of mining. So we've had exploration, we've now brought an asset to production, and with ION, the focus is accumulate assets, potentially bring it to production with a partner or ourselves, but ultimately look to an exit where it makes sense as well. Our flagship asset, Valuation, that we went public on in August 2020, is about 81,000 hectares, 23 kilometers from the Chinese border. And that's the asset that you see there. Each of those green spots represents a gigafactory, very similar to what Tesla may have in Nevada or Shanghai, as you see in the bottom right of your screen there. And of course, we associate EVs with Tesla, and that's important because they are the forefront of what we have here in North America. But BYD, NIO, Geely, these are companies in Asia that have produced vastly more EVs than Tesla combined, or multiples of Tesla. And today in North America, Hyundai, the Korean company, sells more EVs than Tesla combined. So our proximity to the producers cannot be denied. We acquired the asset with an average grade of 426 ppm, a maximum grade of 811 ppm. It's in the Gobi Desert, so very similar environment to Nevada or LATAM, the Lithium Triangle. The impurity ratio, for those that understand the lithium extraction process, has been favorable. So we have no real sort of red flags with respect to anything that may throw a wrench in the cog, so to speak. The fact that we're so close to the border, of course, makes us very competitive. This asset was acquired in 2019. We went public in 2020, a time in which nobody could travel the world despite our very strong technical team. And we found brines that were quite significant, and we drilled a few holes, about 222 to be precise. And in that drilling process, we found grades that were 1,502 ppm. almost double the 811 that was found during the course of the acquisition of the license. We also found copper and nickel, and which of course are quite prominent and relative to the electrification of the world. So we'll spend more time on this asset later this year or into early next, but a really good, promising asset, very close to the major consumers of the planet. About 2 years ago, we acquired Urgak Naran. Urgak Naran is 29,000 hectares in Dorngovi province. Dorngovi is important because it's an infrastructure-rich region. And if you look at my mouse over here, this is a town that's connected to the national grid. So you have power about 7 kilometers away from our basin, which means we can use DLE technology, but it's a typical fault-bound basin, so double fault-bound closed basin environment with salars on surface, similar to what you would expect to see in Argentina. For the first time since we acquired the license in April last year, myself, Don, and Mark, our advisors, went out there to collect brine samples, and we found grades of 918 milligrams per liter on surface. 918 is a strong number, very significant relative to any producing asset or those that are promising. I think Neo Lithium was about 980 average grade. That then prompted us to build an exploration camp on site, and that's what you see on screen. We had Gers on site, myself, Mark, and Don, and Mark does some commentary there where he sees a lot of parallels with respect to Mongolia as well as the Atacama. We then conducted a TEM geophysical survey, and this is very similar to any junior that would be looking for lithium as a paleosolar or a surface solar. And what this does is it allows you to find the resistivity below surface in terms of high density of liquid or brine, if you will. And the density of the brine ultimately equates to the number of dissolved solvents in that brine. And what we found at 6.5 ohm was 22.7 billion cubic meters. And for comparison purposes, if you look at Alpha Lithium, a company that's traded on the TSX as well, they had 1.9 billion cubic meters at 6 ohm cutoff, with an inferred resource of about 2.1 million ton LCE. So about 10 times the size of that project. And of course, we're in Mongolia, we're first movers, nobody to point to in terms of success, but a very strong indication with respect to volume. We then drilled 3 holes that are diamond core holes, so about 4-inch diameter. We pulled up the various cores and had them assayed, and the results of which showed sandstone, gravelite, and very porous material at about 320 ppm lithium across 100-meter intercepts on all 3 holes. And that number is important because if you look at Albemarle Silver Peak in Nevada, they had about 121 ppm. So we're almost 3 times higher than the only operating brine asset in North America today. We've now drilled 3 water wells, which are about 10-meter step out from where we have our diamond holes. We are collecting brine samples as we speak. The team has packed up as of 4 hours ago and heading back to Ulaanbaatar for assay results. And that will allow us to have an inferred resource. So we talked about Alpha Lithium and what they have. We talked about various other juniors. But in terms of volume, I think this is something that anybody that's listening to this story should really pay attention to. The inferred resource, which is 43101 certified, of course, will give us a significant re-rate, but also a fair bit of interest from strategics that are currently looking at us as a company. So I mentioned early on that the ethos of the company was to ensure that we have assets very close to where consumption would occur. Mongolia, very close to China. China consumes a fair bit of lithium. North America really stepping up in terms of lithium consumption. And we've seen organizations like PMET, Lift Power, Gamma Lithium, Lithium Americas with Thacker Pass, really advancing their projects. Thacker Pass in Nevada, of course, received $700 million from GM to help advance that clay deposit. But the Northwest Territories, with the Yellowknife Pegmatite District, has had historical work done on it as far back as the 70s. Canadian Superior, Exxon, spent a fair bit of time there looking for lithium, and they found about 39 million tons at a cutoff of about 1.4% lithium oxide. So it's a proven jurisdiction. What you see on the right here, this is essentially an outcrop of pegmatite in the Yellowknife district. So we acquired 6 to 7 weeks ago Bliss Lake. It is 5,700 hectares of contiguous licenses on Crown land. Initially, the consideration was about $500,000 in equity. We've since re-rated and renegotiated that to about $125,000 in equity. And that's what you see on the map here. So a very cheap acquisition, or less dilutive acquisition, I should say, for our shareholders in a contiguous piece of land. And if you were to look at where we're situated relative to our peers, that's Yellowknife. This is the Bliss Lake project that belongs to Ion Energy. This is Gamma Lithium that went public at about 20 million valuation 3 to 4 weeks ago. And PMET, who has assets in Quebec as well as the Northwest Territories, about $1 billion market cap. So early days, but the social license will be built that allows us to do some exploration here over the course of the summer. And we're very excited with the prospect because we are very close to our peers that have value. Lyft has started drilling about 2 weeks ago with very significant results, and hopefully we can replicate that as well. As a company today, about 62 million shares outstanding, so quite a tight cap table for a junior miner. In terms of management and insiders, 25% ownership. We participate in every round, we buy on every market, and we've never sold a share. So we're owners, shareholders alongside the rest of our cap table here. Mongolian investors that have invested alongside us when we acquired the assets in Mongolia hold about 9%. Family offices, and then a number of names here that may resonate with our listeners. Delbrook out of Vancouver, Palos, US Global, run by Frank Holmes, Ixios, that's David Finch, Broma, the Lundin family, and then Spartan, Alpha North, and Maxit, Toronto-based funds that are rather significant in the mining space as well. Our share price today, as I look across my screen here, about 19.5 million. Our market cap about $12 million. So rather depleted, if I should say myself, as an owner of the company. We're a company that does not sit on our hands. So we're a company that actually gets things done. We execute. About two and a half years ago, we did a bought deal with PI Financial and Stifel GMP. That deal was priced at 50 cents a unit with a 70-cent warrant. That gave us a fair bit of capital to acquire Urgatnaran, to discover the White Wolf prospect, to ultimately bring on what we now have as Bliss Lake. But more importantly, the geophysics we've concluded, the drilling we've concluded at Urgatnaran allows us to move towards inferred resource, which is something that we will be announcing to market here in short order. We have been speaking with strategics, so you can expect to see something there in short order. The reason that that's perhaps delayed is as a result of the Canadian government being, or rather overstepping their jurisdiction with the mandates that they may have had in terms of lithium Chile, for instance. But the fact is, we're pressing on. We're not slowing down. We have measured indicated coming out before the end of the year, as well as scoping, and with the hope of starting pre-feasibility before the end of this year on Urgatnaran as well. In terms of valuation today, our land package is rather significant. I've just spoken to you with respect to our volume as well as our grade relative to Albemarle Silver Peak and Alpha Lithium in Argentina. The coverage we have today is paid coverage. I think that's important for our retail audience, for them to get a sense of where we lie with respect to our peers. We are working with PI, Stifel, Cormark, Haywood, A Capital, Echelon to initiate coverage in short order, but I think that's probably going to be around September. But given the fact that we're trading at about a 20-cent share price today with targets of between $1.18 and $1.45, I can quite unequivocally say that we're not only undervalued, but we are the cheapest lithium play on the TSX today. with that, I hope the group that's listening today has seen that we have an infinite resource that's imminent. Our locations remain very strategic, close to very large consumers that we expect to come online in short order. The team in itself, I think, if you were to put together a valuation on them, it's of significant value in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of market cap. Lithium, as we know, electrification is the path of the future, and that will be a commodity that will remain in high demand. Margins in Mongolia will continue to be low, and we believe we're well positioned to provide stock or shareholder value. So this is our or my contact details, I should say. I'm sure we have questions, but should you want to get in touch with me, this is the way to do it. I answer my phone when it rings and emails just as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali, for going through the great presentation. And yeah, just as a reminder to everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, now is the time. Please continue to ask questions. But Ali, we have a bunch. First question comes from Lily. Is the Uruk-Naran lithium project rich in lithium enough to produce lithium? Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were going to go on. Rich in lithium to produce lithium? Absolutely. If you look at, as I mentioned, Albemarle Silver Peak, the only operating brine asset in North America today, with an average grade in the diamond holes of about 121 ppm in the host rock. Our average grade is about 320 ppm. If you were to look at the volume indication at Uruk-Naran today, we have 22.7 billion cubic meters. If you look at Alpha Lithium, for instance, they have about 1.9 billion cubic meters. If you were to look at the fundamentals in terms of evaporation versus direct lithium extraction, from an altitude perspective, we're not in the Puna, we're not in the Atacama, so we're not as high. So the evaporation rates would be anywhere between 24 and 36 months, as opposed to 12 to 18 months. But that said, access to power, access to water, given the clay impermeable layer that we have seen already at our project, yes, absolutely. The Uruk-Naran project, based on volume and grade indication today, is in my view, significantly stronger than those that you would see at the petroleum brines, perhaps in Alberta or Saskatchewan.
Right. Next question is, can you see this spodumene on the ground surface of the Canadian project?
So the spodumene is on surface. We see pegmatite outcrops as well. If you were to look at the projects that Lift Power controls today, they have about 300 meters outcrop that they identified their ultimate acquisitions on. We have very similar outcrops. We have now acquired satellite imagery with 20 centimeter high-res resolution for us to look for the exact locations that we will conduct our rock chip as well as our channel sampling. So yes, you can see the spodumene and pegmatite on surface.
Great. Lily wants to know, she comments that the company's stock has been going down since April 15th, and she's just wondering if you could provide any commentary.
Absolutely. Lily, great question. As an owner of the company, I feel the pain. I have a significant shareholding in the company, as I've mentioned in the cap table. 25% of the shares outstanding are held in management and insider hands, and we've never sold a share. So we feel the pain alongside the rest of our shareholders. I believe it has to do with a number of different factors. The fact that we're trading in Canada here today, of course, is the primary sort of shareholder base. We've seen interest rates rise. We've seen the fact that inflation is rising as well. A number of individuals are facing margin calls, and as a result of that, they continue to sort of pull back. And that's sort of the retail sentiment that we continue to experience. But that said, it may have to do with news flow, and I think perhaps as a company we can do better with news flow with respect to the acquisitions and what we've seen so far with the fundamentals of the project. We're sitting on very sound assets, but relative to our peers, we haven't dipped that much. I think from a comparative basis with any other junior lithium explorer, we've dipped in the same remit, and I think that's due to the market conditions that we're facing today, unfortunately.
Fair enough. What's the ultimate goal of ION? To become a lithium producer?
It's a good question. Ion started off with a consolidation play that would have ultimately led to an exit, and we're not deviating from that. I think that's very much where we're going. If you look at the team today, Paul Fornazzari, the founding chairman of Lithium Americas, he's a senior partner at Fasken. Knows mining, knows it well, but we're not producers. Don Haynes, exploration geologist. Mark King, exploration hydrogeologist. David Deek, a supply chain specialist. So, in terms of lithium production, it's a very difficult industry because each asset is very much a chemistry experiment. And as a result, you need a very specific team. Not to say that we won't hire the right team if we want to come to production, but if you find synergies in your jurisdiction, such as Asia, where you have the likes of Sinomine, Ganfeng, Tianqi, and various others that have brought assets online that have the expertise, you can allow them to sort of take our projects forward. Whereas in jurisdictions such as the Americas, you may have consolidation opportunities as well. But I would like to point out to our listeners that we do have StepGold, a company that I was very involved with from the onset that ultimately went public. And the statistic that I mentioned during this presentation is, a maximum of 3% of mining companies get to production. And we as a team have done it. So I believe that with Ion Energy and the right team, the right support, if we had to bring it to production, we would.
Okay. Lily says this, they're an investor in hard rock, brine, and clay lithiums, and that the most popular stock is hard rock. Do you have any comments on this, and why do you think so?
Yes, I think Brian had a run because of Chile and the lithium triangle, and ultimately the low cost of production there with minimal ESG sort of requirements ultimately allowed that region of the world to really accelerate what we've seen since the start of the pandemic. And to be clear, and hopefully our listeners are aware, the pandemic really prompted this clean green energy transition. And then on the clay side, we've seen now that Lithium Americas has had a significant investment from General Motors, about $700 million to help advance the clay asset that they have. And of course, there are no clay assets in production today, but it's very similar to technology. It's exponential, and if you throw enough money at it, it comes online and it becomes viable. From a hard rock perspective, in the last cycle in 2016-17, we saw the likes of Nemaska really suffer cost overruns. And of course, lithium was priced at a significant discount to what it is today, and that's perhaps why the economics did not quite work. But I think in terms of hard rock, that will work, and it's a proven model that does work at prices that are where they are today and lower, not where they were in the last cycle. Clays and evaporites still require a fair bit of capital. And in terms of brines, for instance, if you're not using traditional evaporation ponds and you're looking to use DLE, you have to ensure you have the right partner and the right cost curve. And I think DLE will come online in a strong way starting next year with the likes of European majors bringing assets online with multiple tons of production at 99.9% lithium carbonate equivalent.
Okay, great. Jason wants to know, how do you get around the Canadian government restrictions and get a strategic on board? Is there a cap that they can buy up to, or do we sell an asset?
Jason, a man after my heart. But yes, so Jason, what I would say here is the company was very much focused on Mongolia, and we continue to be focused on Mongolia because it's a jurisdiction in which we have a lot of experience and a lot of know-how and transactional records. Hunakol have $1 billion exit. Mongolia as a geology very much mirrors that closed basin environment that you would expect to see in the Atacama and otherwise. And so that interested us to Mongolia, or gave us a fair bit of interest to Mongolia. I started the company in 2017, as I mentioned, Jason, and in 2019, we bought our first asset. In 2019, Sinomine, which is a company out of China, to give you some context, acquired Tanco in Canada. Tanco used to be called Cabot. That mine was primarily tantalum and lithium. Nobody cared about lithium in 2019. So Sinomine currently owns the largest exporter of lithium in Canada today. They're a Chinese entity, and that's Tanco. In 2020, 2021, the Canadian government changed their stance and they found that critical metals had to be protected. And what we have is an organization and subsidiaries of Ion Energy Holdings. We have Ion Energy Holdings, Ion Energy LLC, which is Mongolia, Ion Energy Limited, which is Canada or any else situated. And so in September of last year, I'd been to Mongolia 4 times last year, to be clear, with a number of strategics. And we had some agreements signed with Chinese strategics to come in for about 9.9% of the company, equity perspective, not asset level. And then the government of Canada argued that the Chinese cannot invest in anything that is a Canadian listed company, irrespective of where their assets are. And as a precedent, Lithium Chile, who's of course located in Chile, was asked to ensure that they had a divestiture order. About 7 weeks ago, the Canadian government reversed that decision because the Canadian government has no sovereignty over jurisdictions that are outside of Canada. And what we've done as a company, as a basis of our subsidiaries, is we have an opportunity for foreign investors to come into our company without any impact to ownership for the entity that is Ion Energy, but an entity from an asset level. And they have the ability now to acquire between 9.99% to up to 51% of the asset without any setback from the government. So we've spoken to the TSX, the OSC, the ambassadors of both countries, I beg your pardon, as well as the ministers of mining of Mongolia. And it's unequivocally clear to us that we can have a Chinese entity acquire 51% of our Mongolian entity with no issues.
Okay, thanks. Jason also wants to know just how much money is in the treasury. How do you raise now at the current share price without excessive dilution?
It's a fair question. I think, Jason, if we were to put a capital raise in place, it would be primarily a rights offering to existing shareholders. Should there be an opportunity for anybody else to follow on through that, we'd be more than happy to speak with individuals that would be keen on future placements. But today, a rights offering that management insiders will be keen to take on.
Okay, fair enough. And then another question just about when we can anticipate the inferred resource.
Good question. Inferred resource, of course, we'd love to have it out by Friday. That's always been the goal, Q2. I've said that to the market on a few occasions. Given the fact that we're drilling halfway across the world, I'm here, Don's here, Mark's here. We're dependent on our team in country. That's a very credible team, and they continue to press on. As far as I know, we've had the team retrieve brine samples as of this morning, so I guess it would have been Mongolia last night. They're now taking their samples to SGS, and assay results are incoming. And of course, the assay results will be what drives the inferred resource calculation.
Okay. I actually see that ION's released a press release a couple of hours ago. Would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bliss Lake was initially acquired for about $500,000 in equity consideration. That was done on the basis of looking to find an asset that is in a jurisdiction that, of course, will have value. But the individuals that we've chosen to partner with for that acquisition ultimately saw the market in general, not just ION, everybody else sort of dipping down. And what they opted to do was look at us as a team that included Don Haynes, included Mark King, included Paul Fornazzari, individuals that have built, billion-dollar companies. And as opposed to having a premium to market when the share prices of every other lithium player were declining, opted to partner with us to ensure that our technical team can assist with acquiring additional assets and de-risking them. And so we re-rated that purchase, brought it down, 20% of the original purchase price, which I think is a commendable effort on our part, as well as the team of negotiators. More importantly, I think reduces dilution for existing shareholders, which is as an owner of the company, I think that's more relevant than anything. So this gives us the ability to buy a land package that has vast potential, an ability for consolidation at a lesser price with minimal dilution. So that's the answer to your question, Ken.
Oh, thanks for that, Ali. Another question is, it's just broadly speaking, but do you think that the lithium boom has passed? Is there a limited upside in lithium projects for the next couple of years?
Well, I believe that there was a bit of a inflationary push for investors, or sort of a flavor of the month push for investors to deploy capital in various lithium explorers around the world. But what I would say to that is, we've been around since 2017. We're not a company that just jumped on the bandwagon 2 years ago when prices were rising. We recognize value. We brought on a team of individuals that have had exits that understand the industry. In terms of the boom sort of being over, I disagree. I think that there is some production that's coming online in North America that will allow the prices to somewhat settle. As a board and advisory team, we believe that the price of lithium should be between 16 and 24,000 for it to be affordable to the consumer in terms of electric vehicles. If you look at alternative technologies, fast markets last week, sodium ion gaining a lot of traction as a sort of substitute to lithium ion batteries. Yes, perhaps, but it's not so much one that will substitute the EV space in terms of electric vehicles. And one must welcome competition, because competition ensures that we are on our toes and we're executing. Lithium's been around since the 1950s. It's a technology that's tried and tested. Sodium ion or any other such ion chemistry may have a 20-year adoption period. So lithium's not going away anytime soon, and I welcome competition.
Can we still expect an inferred resource from Uruknaran in the second half of 2023?
That is the goal. We're still working towards that target. I think we'll have an update here in a couple of days, but the team has just left site with the various brine samples, and so we are working hard to achieve that. Stay tuned.
Fair enough. The next question here is, what are the biggest challenges in this current volatile market for a junior miner like you? And how can we have confidence that ION is set for long-term success, outlasting these ebbs and flows?
It's a great question. I think that's one that nobody has a crystal ball to answer. It is a very difficult market environment today. We're seeing, specifically in Canada, a number of margin calls that are forcing, the sale of various equities and ultimately driving them down. For ION, I think the catalyst that we have upcoming, as well as the pivot, or rather the complementary acquisition that we were able to have with the Bliss Lake acquisition, positions us rather well. You also have to look at the global politics that are occurring today. And I've just stated that the US government signed an MOU with Mongolia to help develop critical metals in that region. We're seeing more and more investment pour into that space. As a company, I think with the work that we're doing and the work that we have yet to do, we'll see a significant re-rate in due course here. And so it's a matter of time. Unfortunately, it is a waiting game, but we're well positioned to execute.
All right, great. And the next question is just if you could tell us about ION's ESG vision.
Yes, I mean, the company was founded to look for assets very close to where they would be consumed. And if you look at lithium today, it is shipped from LATAM or Australia primarily to China on bunker burning ships 15,000 nautical miles away. That, of course, is a massive environmental issue. Beyond that, if you were to look at further environmental issues, Chile has had evaporation ponds operating for, call it the last 20 years or so. And what that does is it depletes the water table below surface. It destroys ecosystems for various animals that live in that natural habitat. But we're also looking at direct lithium extraction, which has a smaller footprint, puts back the vast majority of the water back into the water table, and ultimately is significantly more environmentally impactful. And from a social license, we've always had the goal of ensuring that the local community understands what we're doing. So with Baba Ayol, before we started to drill, we had somebody educating the local community. At Urgaknaran, we had somebody instilled in the local community that educated everybody as to what our goals and hopes were. And that ultimately allows you to operate without really impacting the lives of those that live in that area. For some of our sister companies, we've had co-op agreements where we buy dairy and meat from our local communities. We hire from the local communities. We offer scholarships to the local community, and then ultimately hire back those that graduate to work alongside us. And from a governance perspective, of course, we are a publicly listed company. We have various committees that are audit and otherwise that we have to adhere to. But we take it a step further. And we do meet with various groups that help us form a vision in terms of governance and ensure that we stick to it. So ESG is something that we've been doing well before it was a buzzword. And it's something that we'll continue to do as we advance our projects.
As a new or first-time investor, why is ION specifically the story to watch?
Well, that's a great question. I think I'm going to reshare my screen here so I can show you some detail. But as a new investor, why would this be? Quite frankly, Mongolia is a jurisdiction that we have a lot of knowledge and experience in. We've had a significant exit that was a $20 million IPO that led to a $500 million exit in 18 months. It's a country that we brought a mine into production. And if you look at mining today, I think that number is about 3%. So 3% of all mines actually go into production. It is not an easy business by any means. And we have a team that, of course, has executed in a jurisdiction that most don't understand. We have a team in terms of advisors that are world-class in any way that you look at it. So, Paul Fornansari, Don Haynes, Mark King, as well as, of course, our board members. So the team is sound, the track record is sound, the jurisdiction is one that we've had a fair bit of experience in, and the fundamentals, more importantly, are what you should be paying attention to. As I mentioned, with Urgak Naran, we have 22.7 billion cubic meters. We're trading at a market cap of about $12 million today. If you were to look at our peers, such as Alpha Lithium, they had 2.1 billion cubic meters, so about a tenth of what we have, and they're trading at $165 million with a takeout offer of $220 million. So that's the proof is in the pudding, apples to apples, there's your comparison. In terms of what we have in the Northwest Territories, yes, it's early stage, but we have pegmatite outcrops that were visible from space or satellite imagery, much like Lift Power. Lift Power raised about $40 million through flow-through funding not so long ago. And that flow-through funding is now funding a 35,000 meter drilling program. They've released results as recently as about 2 weeks ago that were astonishing. Really good grade in that same jurisdiction in a very infrastructure-rich region that has had historical work done on it. And their market cap, of course, is about $365 million. So if you look at our peers, apples to apples, and jurisdictions, hopefully that gives you a reason as to why ION Energy is a good investment.
Fair enough. Once the financing is settled, what will the timelines be on starting Bliss Lake work?
Bliss Lake will be driven primarily by flow-through funding. The goal for us is that we have that sort of wrapped up here in short order. We've already started the desktop due diligence. We're not sitting on our hands. We acquired the asset 5-6 weeks ago. We are now, we bought high-res satellite imagery, so the team is currently reviewing exactly the points that we would go out there and do our rock chip and channel sampling on. I would very much like to get out there as soon as I can to meet with the First Nations, but I may have to pass that task on to somebody else, given my second child is due on July 15th, and being in the Northwest Territories may make things difficult for us to do. So we do have a group that's working with the likes of LIFT and PMET out in the Northwest Territories that has relationships with the First Nations that I may leverage to have those conversations. I think it's important that we check off the social license before we start to turn a drill or use a hammer on the ground. And that's what we're going to do with either the group that we're working with or myself. Once that's behind us, then we'll get out there and do work. So it'll definitely be this summer. But as to timing, I cannot confirm.
No, fair enough. And Ali, that looks like all the questions that we have for today. So I want to thank you for coming on, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. But before we close off the day, Ali, I want to pass things over to you for any closing remarks.
Of course. Well, thank you everybody for joining again. I think it's a bit early in the morning here in Canada, but I'm not sure what time zones you may be in. I've got a fair bit of time over the course of the next week and a half. I would say if you'd like to connect one-on-one in person, more than happy to do so. As mentioned over the course of the presentation, if there's a rights offering, we will do so in the coming weeks or months. But beyond that, if you're interested in any future financings or want to learn more about our story, get in touch. Our contact details are on our website, and always happy to take a phone call or jump on a Zoom meeting. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining.